When I'm looking at fascia, I'm looking more at like whole movement patterns and chains. So we could be having some left-sided hip and knee pain, but actually could be coming from a right-sided shoulder. Because we are in this cross crawl type pattern, when I move this right arm forward, it's going to put a traction and pull all the way down to the left hip. And so you're starting to look at the body as this force transmission instead of just like, this is my bicep that goes to my pec and now it goes into my abdomen. And so we're looking at this force transmission across a huge matrix versus just one muscle to another. So I would say they coexist, but you have to really understand biomechanics to be able to treat fascia correctly. Because you can treat fascia and you can treat it correctly, but if you're treating it correctly in the wrong place, then it doesn't really do anything for the injury.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Becca Babbles podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me, Dr. Felton. She is a chiropractor, and she is also a professor at my school, Parker University. But not only that, she is a mama of two. She is a Christian author of many books and loves fascia. We're going to deep dive into fascia today with all the different research that she's been looking at. But first, Dr. Felton, do you want to say hi? And is there anything else you'd like to add before we get started?
No, I'm super excited to be here. I love fascia, so I'm ready to nerd out and dig in a little bit.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I start a question off with, for every guest, this one question, and it's basically you're walking into a library and you open a book and you find your name in the book. How would you be described?
Oh man, so I kind of cheated on this because I listened to a few of your other podcasts, so I knew it was coming. So I got to think on it a little bit, and it came to me relatively quickly. But in Matthew, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, "Well, well done, my good and faithful servant." And I feel like if there was a dictionary of my life and that was next to my name, I would have done it right. So I think that's what it is.
I love that. That's a good answer. I like that one. Okay, so I know your journey with chiropractic has been very unique. Could you give us a little rundown of like your journey through the chiropractic world and like how you came to teaching?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually went to Parker. Met my husband there too. I started Parker back in 2009, so it's been just a little bit. It's been a great journey. I actually started pre-med. In my pre-med rotations, I was in the hospital watching different procedures. And during one of the procedures, there was just a lot of blood. There's a lot of tissue splashing everywhere. And I just passed out. And I was like, this is not it. Like, I don't want to go this route. What am I going to do? And then I got kind of turned on to the chiropractic route, which is more of a holistic route. There's way less blood. So I joined that trail, joined Parker. I've been out for 12 years now. I joined the first year out of school. I did a lot with babies, with mothers, and children with developmental delays. So I got my certifications in chiropractic neurology. Went that route. It was really interesting. I enjoyed it, but about a year into practice, just something was missing. I wasn't super passionate about what I was doing, and then I kind of discovered this fascial option. And things that I had been treating for months and months that was taking me so long to fix, I could fix in like 1 or 2 visits when I understood the fascial system. And it was just mind-blowing. So I went that route. I kind of left the general chiropractic route behind and went the fascial route, understanding fascial structures, biomechanics, and movement patterns. And I've been doing that for the past 11 years. So
That's awesome. What were some of those like changes that you were seeing from like your neuro patients to those fascial patients?
yeah, so with the neuro patients, I kind of went away from treating the children with developmental delays, just treating the general population with fascial issues. I tell students all the time, like, don't get too many certifications too early, because once you get in the field, you really discover what you're super passionate about. And I paid for all these certifications that I enjoyed, but I just wasn't in love with it when I started treating. And so I always encourage students, just don't throw your money into a ton of certifications until you're really sure that's what you're passionate about. But the general population is now what I see with fascial issues. So it could range from infants to adults to all different types of pathologies and injuries.
Yeah. And for people who don't know what fascia is, because for me, I remember going into school and even like this was like undergrad and you're like, oh, it's that like mystery tissue that just like
Yes.
covers the like you have your if you know the medical terms, it's like perimyosum and like epimyosum and you're
Epimyosin.
like that
Yes.
thing, yeah, all the things that you're just like, yeah, it's that tissue that covers the muscle. But even then for like the general population who don't know what fascia is, could you explain that in like simple terms?
Absolutely. I will try. So fascia, it's this like mysterious white substance, right? I would explain to like layman's people, if you've ever been a hunter, you live in that world of skinning animals. When you take the skin off, you see this white substance between the skin and the meat. And it's this like spider webby substance, and that's the fascia. And fascia covers everything in the entire body. It covers the entire muscle itself, down to the muscle bundles, the fibers, the nerves, the vasculature, your organs, everything is encapsulated by fascia. So this fascial network, this matrix, it's basically a matrix, right? So an embryo, whenever you're being formed, your body starts with fascia and it starts to form these pockets that then house your organs, they house your muscles, they house your nerves, it houses everything. And the fascia is about 70% water. So it's this visceral elastic material. So it's liquid and it's elastic. And when we study it on cadavers, it actually makes it really difficult to understand what it is because there's no fluid. And so we see this like white sticky substance. Whenever you look at it on a real body, it's actually this very visceral substance that flows and moves. And it's just this matrix. So if you've ever heard, have you ever seen those like Chinese fire trap, those finger traps?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So like you put your finger in this Chinese finger trap and then you try to pull it away, but the trap compresses and condenses around it and resists that like tensile force. So that's kind of like what fascia is. It's this matrix and this webbing that just helps us, our bodies, to resist force. When you think about the biotensegrity model, which is basically, a lot of structural engineers use this, but it's basically our bones are our structure, right? So we stack one bone on top of another bone and we have this structure and it can resist compression, but it cannot resist tension and it cannot resist shear forces. So this is where the fascia comes in and it resists all of those different types of forces and holds our body together, kind of like that finger trap. So
Okay,
if
so
that makes sense.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're basically saying what the muscle, like the force that the muscle cannot control, is what fascia is supposed to be supporting.
Right. Well, it's really the bones too. And the fascia is what houses all of our muscles. So instead of thinking about it as like one muscle connects to another muscle, it's actually this fascial pocket that your muscle exists inside of. And your fascia is this network that connects the whole thing. So only about 30% of the muscles actually go from origin into insertion, only 30% of those fibers. So what travels or what takes the muscle from origin to insertion is the fascia. It's the fascial network that takes the
Mm.
whole muscle all the way through. So that's where you get your force transmission, is through these fascial planes. So
Yeah, and
it's really cool.
yeah, I would definitely say it's cool. I think, especially if you like go to the gym a lot, like me having a personal trainer background, it's like all you think about is that like muscle that's working, and you don't actually think about like what's connecting that muscle and what's supporting it to work together. It's really cool.
It is so cool. And when you see it that way, you start to see the body a little bit differently too. You don't look at it as just like one muscle. You see this whole pattern of muscles. Just the other day, we were working on some students and they had TL junction pain and SI pain with lumbar extension. So after watching her move a little bit, after asking her some questions, she had an old shoulder injury. So I actually went up to the posterior shoulder where the lat comes in and inserts and did some fascial release of a continuum distortion that was in that area. And after we released that posterior shoulder, she repeated extension. She had no pain. No pain in the SI, no pain in the TL junction. It's because we understand this fascial network is this whole network that's causing a kink somewhere up the chain, and then things can't move anymore. So you start to look at the body in a different way when you understand fascia, and it's just, oh, it's so cool.
Yeah. Would you explain it as like just a full sheet that's like in your entire body that's completely connected?
Absolutely. It is just this
Okay.
matrix of just folded and different fibers in different directions, just this spider webbing that literally connects our entire body and holds it together.
So when people have like trigger points and stuff like that, a lot of the times people like explain it as if it's within the muscle. Would you say it's more within the fascia, or are they like two separate things?
So the way I would describe it, and the way it actually, so in the early 90s, Dr. Stephen Topaldos, he's one of the guys that started studying this stuff, and he studied it in the ER. And he actually used it on people to prevent heart attack and post-stroke. So this
Oh,
stuff just
wow.
goes way beyond anything we truly know. And that's why it's been so hard to study, because of its matrix. And most of the time when we see it, it's on cadavers. So we lose really the value of what's happening inside this matrix. So he was one of the first ones to discover what he called linear bands. So you have 7 different types of distortions that form within the muscle. And to be able to separate the muscle from the fascia would be so hard, right? Because your muscle covers your fascia covers your muscle, then it covers the bundle, then it covers the fiber. It just covers everything down to the smallest piece. And so when you look at the muscle, it essentially is fascia. It's all the same thing. But I do think a lot of the times when you get these fascial distortions, it's between the layers of the fascia where they touch, because you're
Mm.
supposed to have visceral fluid that allows the fascia to move. And when the visceral fluid decreases or you're dehydrated, you lose the ability to glide, and you start to get these nodules or these cylinders or these linear bands that form. So he found this in the ER when he was studying and treating people. And so he started to name them based off of what they did or what type of presentation they came with. But the fascia is 70% water. And so whenever you are dehydrated, you actually decrease chemical compounds that allow the gliding. And fascia has its own nociceptors. So nociceptors are our pain receptors. So whenever we have a decrease in this chemical compound and we're dehydrated, it fires our nociceptors. So we get these myofascial pain syndromes just because of dehydration and lack of glide and movement through the body. And one of the coolest studies that they came out with, and I'm excited to see how it's going to correlate, but they found that water holds memory, right? So whenever someone cries, they did a study, they took someone who cried tears. So different kinds of tears, whether it was tears of grief, sorrow, joy, pain, they took them under a microscope and they looked at their structure. And so every tear that was cried from grief had the same structure. Every tear that was cried from joy, from pain, from sorrow, whatever it was, it had the same structure. So water holds memory based off of our past traumas, emotions, and life. And so the thought is, if the fascia is 70% water and water holds memory from different traumas, could that alone cause pain within the human body?
That's
Just,
crazy.
isn't it so cool?
Yeah, because I was looking at some stuff before our conversation about fascia, and some people were talking about like the emotional connection with fascia, and I was like, how does this work? Like I've briefly read the book. It's been a long time ago, but The Body Keeps the Score, and like how that all like interconnects. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But now with the research that you're talking about with the water and how it's mostly water, that kind of ties it together a little bit more. And I'm just curious, like, how much people who have like low back pain, it's like maybe if
Oh
we just
man.
like drink a little bit more water. And then also like I'm even just thinking like me sitting here, I have my water here, and like the words that you're using while you're just like going through your daily life and work, how that may be affecting just your fascia in general. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's so cool. And when you start to look at, like you say, the low back, that's the densest area of fascial tissue. You have this thoracolumbar fascial tissue, and it's so dense. And they've done studies on rats that they found that the denser the fascia through there, the more nociceptors they were finding.
Wow.
And if the fascia is dense, it's because of post-trauma, because we're actually not staying hydrated. So these fibers are thickening and then becoming hard. And then we're getting a firing of nociceptors, and we're getting chronic low back pain.
Oh my goodness, my mind is just so blown.
Oh, I love it. And
Yeah.
there's so much. You can get into talking about Ehlers-Danlos with fascia stuff, because there's different types of EDS, which is a connective tissue disorder where we get elasticity, hypermobility in different places based off the collagen that's found in those areas. And we're tying it back to some fascial research too, and understanding that fascia in different places is made up of different types of collagen. So the
Mm.
fascia that surrounds your visceral tissues versus just your muscles will have different types of collagen fibers. So we're kind of tying it back into the different diagnoses of EDS as well.
Oh my goodness, could you dive a little bit more into that? I would love to hear more.
Yeah, so it's been really hard for them to categorize fascia, just because when
Hmm.
you look at it on a cadaver, it's like this way and this way and this way and this way. And it's just everywhere, right? So it's just spider webbing of matrices. And so I think that's why it's been really hard to study over the last few years. So it's only, what is that, in the 90s to now, we're looking like 30-ish years that they've been studying it, but they've been able to categorize it a little bit based off of location. So surrounding visceral tissues, surrounding joints, surrounding muscles, extremities, head and neck, and depending on location and where it's at, whether it's superficial or deep, it'll have different types of collagen fibers. And so it could be more of a type 3 collagen, it could be more of like a type 4 collagen. And when you look at EDS, that's where you'll get the genetic mutations, is in that type of collagen fiber. And so it tells us a
Okay.
little bit more about, is it like a type 1 EDS, a type 2, like what types of EDS is this, and what types of fibers is it affecting?
So it's almost like the fascia has like the different fibers have different jobs, and depending on the issue you're dealing with, like a certain job is lacking.
Yeah, that's where the mutation is.
Okay, that makes sense. What like I know you had talked about that like you dived into the biomechanics of fascia. I know we talk about like biomechanics with like muscles and bones, but like is the biomechanics of fascia different than the muscles and bones, or are they like pretty much like the same, or like how does it affect movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think they all coexist, right? When
Mhm.
I'm looking at fascia, I'm looking more at like whole movement patterns and chains. So we could be having some left-sided hip and knee pain, but actually could be coming from a right-sided shoulder. Because we are in this cross crawl type pattern, when I move this right arm forward, it's going to put a traction and pull all the way down to the left hip. And so you're starting to look at the body as this force transmission instead of just like, this is my bicep that goes to my pec and now it goes into my abdomen. And so we're looking at this force transmission across a huge matrix versus just one muscle to another. So I would say they coexist, but you have to really understand biomechanics to be able to treat fascia correctly. Because you can treat fascia and you can treat it correctly, but if you're treating it correctly in the wrong place, then it doesn't really do anything for the injury. So understanding
Mhm.
the biomechanics is really what makes you, I think, a good physician at treating fascia, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How would you go about treating fascia? I know we had talked about like making sure you're hydrated, but like let's say someone's dealing with that shoulder pain. I know we don't have a specific case right now, but like
Mhm.
for example, if someone had shoulder pain, where else could they be looking? Do they need to do like soft tissue work or like foam rolling? What would you tell them?
Yeah, to self-treat fascia, it's going to be your foam rolling, your lacrosse balling. There's different ways that you can self-treat fascia. Um, Whatever, like say the student we worked on the other day with the TL junction pain and the SI pain, what muscle? So when I'm looking at the force transmission, and it's all right-sided issues that she has, and so we're looking at this force transmission from the right side, and knowing that she had past right shoulder injuries, I just went to, kind of posterior shoulder. We're looking at the lat. Where does the lat go from? It goes from the humerus all the way to TL junction, all the way down to iliac crest and SI. So it literally
Mm.
attaches the whole chain and force transmission through there. So as she's trying to extend backwards, and the lat's an internal rotator. So she's internally rotated because lat's an internal rotator. She's trying to extend backwards. She's so limited in these motions. So we could just go blow up TL junction, we could go blow up SI joint, but if shoulder is here, by blow up, I mean adjust, right? We're talking about
Yeah.
chiro terms here. For the non-chiropractors,
Yeah, yeah.
adjust, right? Spinal adjustments to TL junction and SI joint. I can adjust that and create mobility through there. But if I've had this fascial network coming in and tied into the lat, which is an internal rotator, maybe I created segmental mobility, but I didn't give this fascial force transmission any mobility to be able to relax and then move, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah. So it's like it's not only that you need that adjustment to allow for mobility within the spine, but it's also like the tissues connected to the
Yes.
spine and the muscles around it that need to allow for that motion.
And that's what's going to allow the adjustments to last longer, right? They're getting
Mm.
subluxations in TL junction and SI joint because there's a dysfunction in the shoulder. And we can adjust those areas, but if we're missing the shoulder dysfunction, they're going to walk out of your office, and a couple days later, it's going to start to come back all over again.
Yeah. I Because I even think about like for myself, a lot of the times I'll get into my adjusting classes and people will be like, "Oh, this area is restricted," but I wouldn't say I'm super hypermobile, but like I'm on the like if there was a range, I'm closer to the range of like hypermobility. But I got all these trigger points and like my especially in my neck, especially during like finals, will be
Right.
like super tight. Yeah, and it's like how much it's like I actually need my fascia to be worked on compared to constantly being adjusted.
Right? Are we creating hypermobility at segments due to compensation from poor force transmission?
Yeah. Are there like mobility exercises that could help with someone dealing with fascial issues, or is it just like the foam rolling?
Oh no, absolutely. There's so many different type of mobility exercises that you can do to help with keeping your force transmission moving well through the fascial planes. Um, a lot of it is the fascial work is hands on. When we're talking about different distortions, it's all hands on treatment, and so you're feeling the distortions with your hands. You're going in and treating them. So those major distortions we do with hands on, but then as far as just like being at home, you can do several mobility exercises, foam rolling, lacrosse balling, different things just to make sure that your fascia is moving well.
Okay. I'm curious because like I can be like a nutrition nerd and we've talked about how hydration plays a role with fascia, but I'm curious, is there like any other things like nutrition wise that could play a role in someone dealing with fascia issues?
Oh, 1,000%. Um, but I definitely have not studied that, so
Okay, that is
I'm
fair.
not gonna tell you that,
Yeah.
I know anything I don't. Like I
Mhm,
know my limits and I love fascia, but if you get me
mhm.
lost in the nutrition world, I can give you like 5 things you should do, but then like
Yeah.
that's my max. So but
That
yes, I
that's
mean 100%. Your body is an accumulation of everything you've done to it for the past 7 years. So every
mhm.
7 years you're regenerating new cellular tissue. So you're a combination of everything that ate. There we go. There's the word. You're a combination of everything that you've put in your body. A combination of every trauma, every emotion over the past 7 years. That's what your whole body is made up of.
Yeah, I've always wondered like how everything always interplays because I always feel like motion and nutrition always go hand in hand with things. I am curious though because everyone's super into like electrolytes and sodium and stuff like that. If in that research paper about like hydration, if the type of water and like if it has electrolytes in it, if that changes anything.
Oh, absolutely. Going to the study based off water has memory. They even did it across like different regions of the world. They pulled water from different regions in the world and found that the structure of the water was different based off the region they found it in. So, absolutely, the type of water you're consuming would definitely have an effect on the fascia.
Yeah. For anyone who's like heard all like myths and stuff about fascia or like have been diving into fascia, and like I know there's so much information on it and because it's like a new thing, are there any like big myths that you hear that you're just like, that's like not exactly right when it comes to fascia?
Yes, absolutely. In the past, I've heard things like, "Well, I don't really don't work the fascia, but just work the muscle."
Mm.
And I'll just be like, "Okay, I'm gonna make sure my face has a filter on it, so my thoughts don't actually come out through my face." But I think that's the myth: is people think they can just work muscles without affecting the fascia, but the fascia is embedded in every single layer of that muscle. So I think that's probably one of the myths that I hear the most is, like just work the muscle. We're not worried about the fascia. And I should like, let me tell you, let me enlighten you with some truth.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah. And I think that was the hardest thing when I left kind of just general chiropractic and adjusting all the time for fascial treatment. I remember I had like colleagues that I graduated with who were just like, she's an idiot. Like, what is she doing? Like
Mm.
she, has lost her mind. And then I would talk with them and be like, but no, like you don't realize like this low back pain I've been treating for 6 weeks, like in 2 visits, it's gone. And I just got so passionate about this. And I think that's what makes doctors when they get out of school, when you figure out what your passion is, lean into it because that's what makes you a good doctor because you get so passionate about what you're doing, you're passionate about your patients. So I always encourage students like whatever drives that passion, just man, fall into it, work hard at it. Your patients will come because they see it because you do a good job with them. So I think going back to your original question, is it was hard making that decision, like to do less adjusting and more fascia, because as a chiropractor, that's kind of our bread and butter. And so people thought, we were a little crazy, but when they see the results of it and they see the effects, they're like, what is happening here? Is this magic? And I'm like, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all magic because it works, but like there's
Right.
definitely stuff to it. I feel you in the sense of like you're this chiropractor. People come to a chiropractor and they feel like they should be adjusted. And I like during try 5 last try, it was like I was kind of going through this like, do I really want to be a chiropractor? Did I pick the right thing? What's going on? Especially because like I have that heart for nutrition and movement, which I know kind of goes into chiropractic, but there was like this moment of like, is it okay that I do other things besides solely just adjusting, or like that being like the circle of my practice? And the answer is obviously yes. It's like people are coming to you to get treated and to get better. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing as long as it's like actually helping the person. As long as you're like getting them where they want to be. So I think that's amazing that you were like able to separate from like your colleagues to actually just treating the person.
It's been a great journey, and I think as chiropractors, sometimes we do get a bad rap in the medical field of just like, oh, you're the guy that there's a bone out, go put it back in. And it's so much more than that, right? The body is so much more developed and just divinely made than just the bone is out of place, go adjust it. And I think that's why sometimes chiros get a bad rap, because it's just like, oh, this is out, let me throw it back in. But if you start to think about why is that out? What are they doing that's causing that vertebra to be rotated? And if all I do is put it back in, are they going to go back to doing the same thing they were doing, and is it going to go right back out? They're going to have to come back into me next week, and I'm going to have to adjust it again. And then the next week, I'm going to have to adjust it again. Because I'd never figured out why it was happening. And now they're 15 visits in, and they're like, well, chiropractic just didn't work. And it's like, but it does work. But we just have to dig a little deeper than just why is the bone out of place.
Yeah.
If that makes
When
sense.
you were transitioning from that, like, I might not be adjusting all the time to I'm going to be doing this fascial work, and my colleagues are over here saying, like, you're crazy, you're insane, what are you doing? What was that like for you? And how did you maintain, like, no, this is the right thing to do? I want to go this way despite what everyone else is saying.
Honestly, it's just the results. When you have someone come into your office and they're just like, you're my last hope. I've been everywhere. I've tried everything. Like, nothing works. Just please help me. Like, please make me feel better. And, you do a few things and like you ask them to get up off the table. And in that moment, I'm praying like, Lord Jesus, like, let this person get off the table. But when they get off the table and they turn around and look at you and they just like tears flowing from their face, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I've had this for so long. What did you do? And so the results of the treatment is just like, I didn't care. Like it was just like, this is it. This is what I love. If I can help people, because that's what we're all here, right? Is to help people. No matter what route you go, there's so many routes within chiropractic that's going to help people. You just have to love what you do. But I think that's it. When people get off the table and they hug you and they're so grateful that they feel better, and like you got to do that with your hands and help somebody, I think that's just, there's no greater feeling. And so the results in itself is just what made it so easy to be like, this is it, this is my jam.
I can't wait. I just need to graduate and get there.
Oh man, you're gonna do so good. You already have such a passion and light. Like, you are just gonna envelop people and help them so much.
Oh, I appreciate that. So I want to dive a little bit into your past, because I know you had
Yeah,
mentioned to me that you like worked up the corporate ladder, and then at some
I
point you just
did.
like hit burnout and you were like, I can't do this anymore. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, so I will say, we go through undergrad and chiropractic school, and you're looking at like nearly, with both of those, like nearly a decade, probably like 7-ish years to get through all of that. So I'd done that, and then for 12 years, like worked in the chiropractic field. And so we're looking at like, what, nearly 20 years that I'd put into chiropractic. And then my hands went out. So I ended up getting some ulnar nerve entrapment bilaterally. So I have atrophy through the hands, which made it very difficult to treat. And I remember we had just hit, like, we had an awesome office. I was so blessed to be able to go into a location in Richardson, and with the fascial work, with what we were doing, it was able to grow drastically. So I was able to bring on 2 other colleagues into the office, and we were max capacity. And I always tell people, they're always like, there's so many chiropractors in the world. And I'll be like, it's totally fine. Like, if you do what you do well, like, you will be busy. We had chiropractors, literally, we were in this like shopping strip. We had chiropractors on either side of us. And we were still max capacity. And it's just because I think we were so passionate about people. So don't worry if there's literally a chiropractor like down the street. If you're passionate about what you do, you'll be busy. But we were rocking it out. I loved it. It was awesome. We had just won for the 5th year in a row. We had just won Best Chiropractic by Living Magazine. And that year we had received a Congressional Award from Congressman Von Taylor for just efforts in the community and impact in the community. And that was the year, like, my hands just went out. Like, they were just done. And I just couldn't treat anymore. And so I remember being like, all right, God, like, I know you got a plan, but I'm not sure I like this one. But let's go. And so my company at this time, I worked for a company called Airrosti. They were just like, just stay with us. Like, look, we've got corporate positions, like, come into the corporate world. And so I shifted and transitioned into the corporate world where I worked with a lot of like new doctors in the field. So I trained a lot of new doctors, went and did different presentations and talks with different hospitals, municipalities. So a lot of speaking. I just climbed that corporate ladder for a few years and climbed it really well, like got close to the top of the corporate ladder. And I was just like, this isn't it. Like, I don't get to put my hands on people. And I was very blessed for the opportunity to do that. But at that point, I was just like, all right, like, I think this is it. I'm throwing the towel. So I stepped away from the chiropractic world and just thought I was done with it. My husband's a chiropractor. He still works. He works for Airrosti. He's always been there for 12 years, but he loves it. He's going strong. But I was just like, what do I do? Like, that's my identity. I don't know what to do anymore. And so we ended up like going into like franchise investing. So we got a franchise. It's like a cheer athletics gym, if you've ever heard of cheer athletics. And so I was like, well, I'll just go in there. I'll help out, like do some like biomechanics classes for the athletes, go that route. It wasn't, I mean, we love the gym. It's doing awesome. We're still owners of the gym. But I was just like, man, this isn't it either. Like, I don't know what I want to do. So I stepped out and I just, like, I dove deep into my faith and I started writing books. And which was so much fun. I never had the time to just sit down and write. So I just started writing books. And then I got invited to speak at some conferences. And what I got to do was take scripture and overlay it with how God made our bodies, like the anatomy that I understand and know, and cross them over and go in and talk to people about it. And like, it was so fun. So a structure like laminin, right? We have a structure in our body that's called laminin. And laminin is our adhesive molecule. It literally holds our body together. So without laminin, we wouldn't be able to actually stick together. And if you look at laminin under a microscope, it's actually in the shape of a cross.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So we, inside of our own bodies, we have the shape of a cross, which is actually what's holding us together.
That's amazing.
Just things like that. So I've got to dabble in that for the past couple of years. I get to go again here to a retreat in a couple months and do some more. But I love finding things within the human body that are also biblical and then putting them together and talking about it. Like that's my jam. And so I've been doing that for a while. And then like one of my colleagues, Dr. Cummings, she's a professor at the university as well. She was so great to work with. She's an absolutely wonderful colleague. We worked together for like 7 years at this point in time. Super intelligent. She had called me and she's like, hey, there's a position available at the university. Do you want to come and be a teacher? And I was like, nah. What? No. Like, I can't do that. I would not be good at that. She's like, come on. And honestly, it's probably because she was tired of me writing books. She was like, you need to do something. Like, let's go. So I went up to Parker and it was for real some PTSD moments as I drove back onto that campus. A lot of memories came rushing back and I was like, what are we doing here? But it was great. I went through the process. They hired me on. I've been there for a year now and I have loved it. It has been so much fun. The cool thing is like I get to bring this fascia stuff to campus and it's stuff that students really haven't heard much of because we don't really talk about it much. And through just like the popular demand of people wanting to know more about it, we had proposed to the curriculum board at the university a course for it. And they accepted the course. It starts next trimester. We get to go, like God just keeps opening doors. We get to go back into the cadaver lab. We get our own cadaver to go into, to look at the fascial planes, to look at nerve entrapments. I got to meet with Dr. Everett Johnson, which if y'all haven't talked to him about fascia and you really want to nerd out on some fascia, that man, he's like a Dr. Moore, if you know Dr. Moore at the university. Just on fascia alone, and it blows my mind how smart this guy is. But he's going to be helping us dissect the cadavers. So it's been a whirlwind, but it's been so fun. I've absolutely loved it.
Yeah, when you were starting off the podcast and basically saying that you were like, how you defined yourself, you were not kidding in the way that you had defined yourself, that you were just a servant that just kept doing, like, following the next steps of what was for you. And as a person who tends to be more of like a type A planner, I'm getting a little bit better about like creating more space. And I know a lot of people who tend to listen to my podcast fall into that category. How would you support that person in saying that, like, letting go actually opens up more doors?
Oh man, like that's not a lie. Letting go opens up so many doors. I would never have put myself in this position ever, ever. Like, told me to be a teacher, I'd be like, what? You know, there's God's plans are so much better. And I always fall back to this. Like my husband had told me this story about this man went up to Mother Teresa and he asked Mother Teresa, like, will you pray for me, Mother Teresa? Will you pray for me that I can have clarity in my life and what I'm supposed to do? And Mother Teresa looks at him and she said, no. So I won't pray for you for clarity. She said, but I'll pray for you for trust. Because if you trust in the Lord, you don't need clarity. And so I think that right there is kind of what gets me through. It's like, all right, like I don't need clarity in the plan that I have because I know God's plan is going to be so much better.
Mm. So do you always typically just like go back to scripture when you're dealing with times like that? Like, I'm the time where you had just like you're dealing with your injury and you had to like leave chiropractic and you kept hitting this like, it's this isn't it. This isn't it.
Yeah.
What was like the story you were telling yourself, and then like how did you break out of that? Like, what was your process?
Oh man, like I'm not gonna lie, like me and God were fighting. Like I was mad.
Mhm.
Like it wasn't this like pretty walk in faith. I was like, Lord, what are you doing? Like I've spent 20 years like of my life preparing for this. Like, why are you taking it away from me? So it wasn't pretty, but I stayed with it. I just stayed with
Mm.
talking to him and just like stay in the process and be like, I'm mad at you, but I know you got a plan. So here we go, like one more day. But I think that's what it is. I think if you just have faith in one more thing. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Like never would have dreamt of being at the university, a course opening, we get cadaver, we're going to publish research through the cadaver course. Like I didn't do any of that. I just was obedient and put one foot in front of the other. And each time I did it and just walked in my passion of loving fascia, it's just like doors just kept opening. So I would encourage you, like, you don't have to have clarity. It's literally just one step and then the next step and then do what's the next right thing? What's the next right thing I can do today? What's the next right thing I can do tomorrow? I think
Mm.
we put this burden on ourselves thinking that we can control our lives, that we can control the direction, that we can control the outcome, but we can't. We're never meant to carry that load or that burden. And I think we can. And that's when we start to break. So the freedom and surrender, it's awesome.
Yeah. Back to it's magic, but like not.
I know. I think that's like my favorite thing right now. I'm pretty sure I got that from my son because he's always like, "Mom," which I'm actually in his room. So this is not my room in here. I have an
Oh,
office.
I
It's
thought
on a
you were a big like football fan.
no. This is my son's room. And these are his gaming headphones. Like, tell me you're a mom of a boy without telling me. But my office is on the porch, and it's like a screened-in porch. But I've got chickens, and I love my chickens. And
Mm.
they love to come talk to me about this time of day, like 9 o'clock, and they're so loud. And so I was out there ready to go, like in my setup, and they're just squawking. And I was like, this is not going to work. And I knew, so I was like, well, I'll go in my son's room. He's got a desk and his game stuff set up. And so here we are.
I love
Yeah.
it. It's great. The authenticity in this moment is, I love it.
Oh, yeah. It's
Um
all real.
yeah. I want to go back to the when you were talking about how fascia and the body and how it connects to like Christ and how you were teaching that to other people. Could you dive a little bit more? You had mentioned how the lamina was in the shape of a cross, but was there anything else that you found that allowed the human body to overlap with scripture?
Oh yeah. So laminin, look it up. It's amazing when you actually get to look up what the structure of laminin looks like on the microscope. But we'll talk about different things, like whenever God says like he made us from the dirt and yet to the dirt will return. And so when we talk about being made from the dirt, what do we know about grounding? Grounding is
Oh, yeah.
standing with your feet in the dirt, and it actually increases and boosts endorphins. It decreases inflammation by 50%. So just by standing in the dirt, which is called grounding, your body has so many different health effects, like positive health effects that come from standing in the dirt. But let's go back to scripture. He made us from dirt. He made us from the dust of the earth. So of course, standing in it is going to make us feel better, right? So that's one of the things. The other one is whenever we perceive light, our eyes perceive white light. And if you take white light and you put it into a prism, it breaks up into all the colors of the rainbow. And so every day we are perceiving bright light, which is all the colors of the rainbow. We know that the rainbow represents a covenant with the Lord. So whenever we had the flood and then all the waters washed away and then God put a rainbow in the sky as a covenant with his people, saying like, I'll never flood the earth again. So every day we get to look at his covenant just by looking through white light.
Oh my goodness. You have so many mic drop moments. I'm curious with the grounding piece. I know like technology and like you see all the like biohackers with all their like tech trying to almost like recreate what God has given us with the earth, and like the grounding mats and the like I have a red light therapy unit next to me, and it's like you do that instead of like going out and like getting into the sun because like I'm at my desk all day. But like
right,
I
like I feel like
wondered,
God's just like, I made this for you and it's for
yeah,
free if you want to go outside. You know, but it's like as humans
yeah,
we're like, oh, we could profit off this, like how could we? No, we
yeah.
live such busy lifestyles that it makes it easier, but yeah, like it's out there for free.
Yeah, it's almost back to that whole thing of like we want to control everything, literally meaning to like make everything ourselves. Which I feel like he's created us to have hands and to build things, but like also relying on him at the same time and not just fully taking control.
Absolutely. And that's where it's the freedom and surrender.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just so hard to do. But we realize at the end of the day it was never our plan to begin with, and it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah. When you became a Christian author and you started like doing speaking engagements, how has that helped you transfer into like teaching students at Parker?
Uh, it definitely has helped because I was, when I taught through the corporate side of things, it was one-on-one. And so like I really wasn't used to teaching large crowds. And then when I stepped into the speaking world, we'd have large crowds of women at conferences and retreats. And so I got used to speaking on stages in front of large groups. And if I look back, before I left the corporate job, I was speaking at municipalities and hospitals to large groups too. So I think he was always preparing me to be able to speak in front of people. But it's just like he was taking what I was talking about from a corporate side of things, then he put it into faith, and then he's transferred me over to university. And I remember when I got the job, I was just like, all right, Lord, like if you're sending me to that university, it's because I'm taking you there. And so I feel like he's just used all of those pieces to now get me here. And so yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, I love it. I always see your like Bible on the desk, and I was like, "Oh man, I know I want to talk to this lady."
Yes, and that's why I bring it, because I'm like,
Mhm.
anyone want to talk about Jesus? Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I've had so much fun on this podcast with you diving into fascia, your faith, and like how you just keep staying a servant with God. And I have one last question before we end this
Yes.
call. And you probably already know this
I
since
don't
you
know
did
this
a
one.
Oh.
I didn't prepare. Oh
Oh
no.
no.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So we get a real life
Oh
moment of this
gosh.
one.
Okay.
If you were to go back and tell your younger self anything, what would you tell them?
Oh man. Oh. See, this is why I told you I'm not good at impromptu. I don't know. I I don't know. I think I would have just told my younger self like to enjoy the days more and say less.
Mm.
Say less. There's so much that we say that we either want to take back, or there's so much that we say that we don't truly mean, or there's so much that like we want to get a point across and we end up speaking in this huge paragraph that we've totally lost the point. So I would say like enjoy each day and say less.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me
Absolutely.
today. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
I'm so excited to watch you grow in your profession and your passion. You're going to do some awesome things.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Becca Babbles podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing that you can do is leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other listening platform of your choosing. If you want to learn more about me, you can do that by following me on Instagram at Becca and Wellness, or by checking out my blog, freebies, offers, and newsletter on my website at beccaandwellness.com. If you want to share the love of the podcast, you can do that by taking a screenshot and sharing it on social media and tagging me and the podcast at Becca and Wellness and using the hashtag Becca Babbles Podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to babble with you next time.